Okay, so welcome back to our next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to discuss residual risk and safety. So, residual risk is the risk remaining after risk control measures have been implemented. And what effectively we're looking to do here is when we do our risk assessment, we should identify many risks. So, you might have risk 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way down to anything from, depending on what you're building, to 20 risks, to 100 risks, to even more risks. And then for each of those risks, we want to classify them in terms of probability of occurrence and severity of harm. Okay, so we're going to classify them somehow in terms of probability of occurrence and severity of harm. Then we're going to say, are they acceptable or unacceptable, which is the evaluation. And let's say that most risks we say are going to be unacceptable. Okay, they're all unacceptable, and that's generally how it'll go. Some will be acceptable, of course, but most will be unacceptable. Then what we are going to do is we are going to, for all of these, introduce risk control measures, similar to our last example. And after we have introduced the risk control measures and we have verified they are in fact implemented and effective, we will again do a residual risk analysis where we will ask what is the probability of occurrence and severity of harm after risk control measures have been implemented. So then we're going to go again, probability of occurrence and severity of harm, and we will describe them similar to, we'll use the same tables as we did for over here. Generally, what we'll find is that the probability of occurrence should always drop, and the severity of harm often will stay the same, but sometimes we can justify that it has dropped. And then what should happen is we get over to the residual risk evaluation, and hopefully because we have introduced effective risk control measures, we can say that this is acceptable, this is acceptable, this is acceptable, this is acceptable, etc. Hence, no further risk control measures have to be introduced. Now, you might arrive at the case that a certain risk is still not acceptable and further risk control measures are not practicable, and then all you have to do is just make the case that the benefits outweigh the risks, okay, for whatever is this residual unacceptable risk that is remaining, which can happen. Okay, so that's the residual risk in a nutshell. And then if you remember, this definition of safety, generally people have a tough time understanding what it is until they've just gone through the full risk management process. And if you remember, safety is freedom from unacceptable risk. So by applying risk management, we have identified all these risks, we have introduced risk control measures to bring the risk to an acceptable level. Hence, we are now free from unacceptable risk. Hence, our device is now safe. Okay, so hopefully now that definition starts to make sense. If the residual risk is still deemed unacceptable, then a risk benefit analysis should be conducted to determine if the benefits of the medical device outweigh the risk, or the intended use of the device should be altered to remove the risk. That is your other option there. To carry out the risk benefit analysis, you look basically at available data and literature, and you write a statement of whether or not the benefits outweigh the risk. And the data and literature there, you kind of want to look at your validation testing, can be a good resource to have, and it's just going to be a statement. If the overall residual risk is judged acceptable, you still inform the users of significant residual risk in the accompanying documentation. So any residual risks basically becomes warnings in your user manual. Then you perform a formal risk management review. Okay, so by this point you should have a full risk management report, basically where you have this giant table of all the risk assessments, the risk control measures introduced and their evaluation, and you should have lots of test reports for evidence risk control measures is effective. And then you're going to look over all of that in your risk management review, and you're going to ask, is risk management complete, basically. Now, another key part of the review is demonstrating that reviewers are independent and that the people who have performed risk management are competent. And the way that you prove people are competent is by training records and certificates, such as the certificate that you can obtain from this course, just a non-YouTube version. And also just a word to note here that it is in fact a clause within the standard where you must have competent personnel, which basically states that persons who are performing risk management tasks shall be competent on the basis of education, training, skills, and experience, and so on and so forth. And all that is basically saying is whoever within your own organization, your own design team, is conducting risk management, you basically must train them. And to comply with that clause, you basically have to be able to demonstrate training records that you have in fact trained people in this stuff. So that's one to note. And of course, a great way to achieve that is just by partaking in our trainings as you're doing now. So you're on the right track. And I will conclude this lesson there, and I shall see you in the next one.